Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to replace the fuel lines on your XT260 weed eater. And the same procedure will apply to many other weed eater grass trimmers out there. And here's a quick view of the trimmer. And the fuel lines are located right here. One's the primer line and one is the actual fuel pickup line that goes in the fuel tank. Now there's a few ways you can replace the fuel lines. One way is you can just remove them from the carburetor, remove them from the tank with the tank attached to the machine. Or you can remove the two Torx screws over here, remove the fuel tank, then you're going to have it in your hands when you remove the fuel lines and reinstall them. I'm actually going to remove the fuel tank because it's a lot easier, and for this you're going to need a T25 Torx screwdriver. And before you start, you may want to empty out the fuel tank because it's going to be a lot safer. And I'm just going to remove both screws. And you can also put it on its side like this, it might be a bit easier. Now what you want to do is remove the two fuel lines from the carburetor. Remember that the bigger line goes on the top connector. That one's for the primer. And now because these fuel lines are old, I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers. And if they're stuck on there tight, just squeeze and turn. And now you want to remove any old line that may be stuck on the connector. So I'm just using an X-Acto. Just going to make a sliver. And now both connectors are exposed and I just clean the carb a bit with my air gun. Now what you need to do is remove both fuel lines. First I'm going to take the fuel cap off. And you can see the primer line, the bigger line here, has a small connector inside. Now I'm just going to reach in with needle nose pliers and grab the bigger line and just squeeze it through. And the actual connector came off, so that's okay. And now I'm just going to pull it out the other way. I'm trying to keep the line intact just so I can measure it easier. Now I'm going to reach in, grab the one with the filter and pull it out. If you feel it's going to break, you can snip it, then pull it out. And then you can still measure it. So now you want to look at all your parts, including the filter. If the filter needs to be replaced, do so. In this case it does. The reason why you may have to replace your fuel lines is because they may leak. Also, they may get brittle and crack. And in this case here, they weren't leaking yet, but I just wanted to do preventive maintenance. And also here, the small connector broke when I removed it. Now, before I reinstall new fuel lines, I'm just going to give you a few options that you have to purchase fuel lines. What I have here are the part numbers for the fuel lines and the fuel filter. Now, these are Poland OEM fuel lines. Now, the small fuel line is part number 5300 69247. And the larger line is 5300 69216. If you decide to replace the fuel filter, it's 5300 956 46. Now you can also buy this Poland fuel line kit. This is actually for chainsaws, but what I like about this kit is you end up with a bit extra fuel line. And it also comes with a little connector for the primer line as well. However, I believe with the other part numbers that this connector comes as well. And this small kit today is 5300 69599. And here are some fuel lines from that kit. The smaller line is 9/64 outside diameter. The inside diameter is 5/64. And I used a drill bit to measure the inside. And the bigger fuel line is 3/16 outside diameter by 3/32 inside diameter. And again, you can use a small bit to measure the inside if you have fuel line kicking around your place. If not, when you go buy it, the measurements should be on the package. Now all these part numbers that I showed you are OEM Poland parts. However, you can use Tygon fuel line or Tygothane. And here's the Tygon fuel line. This would be the smaller fuel line. And here are the specs for the smaller fuel line. And this Tygothane here is also made by Tygon, except it's clear. And this would be the bigger fuel line. And this is really good fuel line, by the way, guys. It's nice and firm, and it does not get brittle and crack. So if it's hard for you to locate the OEM fuel lines, you can always use these as an alternative. By the way, guys, all the part numbers with links to where you can buy them online will be under the video today. Now what I'm going to do is grab the larger fuel line from the kit. I am going to put a small soap solution on the outside of the fuel line. Do not put it inside. And now make sure that the end of your fuel line is cut on a 45 like this. And I'm going to insert it into the fuel tank in the bigger hole. And I'm going to turn. If you find your hand slipping, you can use a rag. Now, as soon as I can see the fuel line protruding in the fuel tank, I'm going to reach and grab it with needle nose pliers. I'm going to pull it out of the fuel tank. And I'm just going to snip it nice and straight. And it's pretty firm fuel line, by the way, guys. And I'm going to reinstall a small connector like this. And you want to push it in as far as it goes. Now what you want to do is pull on the fuel line until the connector is flush to the fuel tank inside. What I'm going to do now is just leave the fuel line as it is, and then I'm going to cut it to size once the fuel tank is on the trimmer. Now I'm going to grab the smaller fuel line. I'm just going to cut a 45-degree angle at the end. I'm going to plug the end of it and spray a bit of soap solution. And I'm just going to repeat the same procedures I did with the bigger fuel line. Now this is probably the hardest part of the whole procedure, is just getting those lines in enough so that you can grab them with the pliers. And now you can see the lines coming out, so I'm going to reach in, grab it. I'm going to pull it out. Now you're going to need to cut it straight. Now because it's a bit difficult installing the fuel filter on the new fuel line because it's so tight, I'm going to heat up the end of the fuel line with the heat gun. This is going to make the end of the fuel line a bit softer so that it's easier to install the fuel filter. You want to do this on a low setting. You don't want to overheat the fuel line because it will melt. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use a hair dryer. If you still have a problem, you can just slightly reheat it. And for some, it might be a good idea to wear gloves when they're doing this, in case they find the fuel line a bit hot. And what you want to do is make sure you push in the fuel line as far as you can on the filter. And as you can see now, it's nice and tight. And now before you put the filter back in the tank, you want to pull it out as far as what the old one used to be in the fuel tank. So this will give you an idea. So it's going to be approximately 6 to 8 inches. Then put the filter back in with the line. And that's done. Now I just need to reinstall it on the machine. And now you want to have the fuel lines by the carburetor. It's easier with the machine on its side like this. Install the 2 screws. And you want to tighten them up evenly. Again, it's a T25 Torx screwdriver that I'm using for this today. Now I'm going to flip it back up. And now I'm just going to measure the lines. The smaller line connects down here, and the bigger line connects at the top. Do not mix up the fuel lines because your trimmer will not run properly. I'm going to start with the smaller fuel line. And this should be long enough here. And now just connect it. It's going to be a bit stiff going on, but that's good. And push it in as far as you can on that connector. If you do find it hard to connect the fuel lines, you can use a heat gun like I did to install the fuel filter. Just be careful using a heat gun around the machine. You want to make sure there is no fuel anywhere. And I'm going to measure the bigger line and cut that one. And it will be a bit stiff getting on too. Just push it in as far as you can. And that's all there is to installing the fuel lines. And before I put fuel and start it up, I just want to give you a few tips when you do this job. First of all, you want to make sure that when you install the fuel lines on the connectors that they're nice and tight to prevent fuel and air leaks. And another very important part is to make sure that the lines go in nice and tight into the fuel tank. The reason for that is because it's only the fuel lines that prevent fuel from coming out of here. If these lines are loose in these holes, fuel will be leaking out of the machine when you use it. So again, it's critically important that these fuel lines go in nice and tight in the fuel tank. By the way, guys, I mix my fuel at 45:1 for my 2-cycle equipment. And I'm just going to prime it. As you can see, it runs good now. After you've ran it for a while, make sure there are no fuel leaks. Sometimes the fuel caps leak, so check that. And just double check between the fuel lines and the tank over here. And everything looks good. Thanks for watching, guys. If you followed the instructions in this video, you're going to be able to do it yourself, whether you've worked on small engines before or not. And make sure to follow me on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and Instagram. The links are under the video, and have yourselves a great day.